My wife, Emily, went out partying without me, even though I had told her not to go. Later, I found out she cheated on me. I never thought I'd be in this kind of situation, but here I am, sharing my story and looking for some support if you all would be so kind. A little about me: I'm Mike, 30 years old, and my wife, Emily, is 25. We've been married for 3 years and together for nearly 6. We don't have kids, no significant assets to our name, just a mountain of debt. We rent a house, and I'm the primary earner, bringing home about $4,000 a month. Emily earns around $1,500. I work my butt off to give her the life she's used to, and now I'm stuck facing this nightmare. I've got a pretty tight-knit group at work. A coworker of 3 years, Tom, invited me to join a recreational soccer league a couple of years back, and I've been playing ever since. Emily would come to all my games, and at first, I thought it was her way of showing support. But deep down, I figured she just enjoyed the drinks that were always part of the scene. Most nights after my games, I'd keep it light with the alcohol since I had work the next morning. Emily, though, wasn't shy about indulging. Afterward, we'd head home together, but occasionally, some of the team would hang out at bars, pizza joints, or even someone's house. We hosted a couple of times, too. A few weeks ago, the team planned to meet up after a game at Tom's place in a nearby city. I told them I couldn't make it, I had to work early the next morning. On the ride home, Emily texted Tom, asking him to give her a ride to the party. Then, she asked me if it was okay if she went. I told her no. I have work in the morning, and I want to spend the night with you, I said. She didn't take that well and gave me the cold, drunken silent treatment. When we pulled into the driveway, another car pulled up in front of our house. It was Tom. I couldn't believe it. Emily had decided, without even asking me, that she was going to the party anyway. I stormed up to Tom's car and told him, I'm not okay with this. Leave. Before I could stop her, Emily got out of my car and into his, and they drove off. Angry and confused, I grabbed an old iPad I had given her years ago. It was outdated but still connected to her social media and messaging accounts. I charged it and watched as her location popped up. I tried to stay awake, but eventually, I fell asleep around 3 a.m., and she still wasn't home. The next morning, I found her in bed, like nothing had happened. I didn't know when she got home. I was too upset to wake her. I got ready for work and left without saying goodbye, a first for me. I wanted her to know I was angry. Before heading out, I tossed the iPad into my briefcase. At work, after some meetings and calls, I checked it again. It lit up with a notification from a messaging app. Tom is typing. What I saw next changed everything. Their messages were supposed to disappear, but the app version must have been outdated. I watched their conversation in real time. Tom was bragging about how they had made love and how some of the other guys had a good time too. I was in shock, but it got worse. Emily told Tom to send her a video of himself doing something obscene, and he did. I saw it all. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I was trembling, barely holding myself together. I told my boss I needed to leave for the day and spend hours trying to calm down. Honestly, I was afraid I'd hurt someone or myself. When I got home, Emily was still sleeping. I asked her to come downstairs, and we sat down face to face. I told her to explain everything. She claimed all she had done was drink, play pool, and chat with people. When I asked if she had talked to Tom that morning, she admitted to texting him but said it was nothing serious. Then, I dropped the bomb. Would your story change if I told you I saw your entire conversation with him this morning? Her face went pale. She burst into tears and immediately asked, Are you leaving me? That was when she confessed. She said she didn't remember much, but she admitted to having sex with Tom and another teammate. She said it might have been more guys, but she couldn't recall. I was disgusted. I asked if this was the first time. To my horror, she admitted it wasn't. She even said one time it happened in our house while I was asleep upstairs. I was numb. I helped her pack a bag and told her to stay with her family. She begged me not to tell anyone. Now, I'm sitting here, 2 weeks past what I'm calling D-Day, with no idea what to do next. Emily blames her behavior on alcohol and claims she wants to join Alcoholics Anonymous. She insists on going to couples therapy to fix things. But I cannot trust her anymore. Every time I look at her, I see the betrayal. I deserve better than this, but for some reason, I feel guilty. Why? I know I'm not perfect, But am I the bad guy here? Any advice or words of encouragement would mean the world to me. I feel stupid for even writing this, but I needed to let it out. Please, be kind. I want to thank everyone who reached out with advice, encouragement, and positivity. It's been nearly a month since I first shared my story, and the support has meant more than I can express. People have checked in to ask how I'm holding up, and it's been comforting to know I'm not entirely alone in this. Unfortunately, things have taken a turn from terrible to downright unbearable. I cannot think of a word strong enough to describe how horrifying this has become. I'm sorry in advance for the length of this update, but it's the only way to lay it all out clearly. Right after my initial post, I followed some of the advice I received and set up a few meetings with attorneys and a legal preparation service. I wanted to make sure I knew all my options. My wife, Emily, had no idea about these meetings. For the first few days after my post, we didn't talk directly, but she kept pushing for us to try marriage therapy, something I had been asking for months before all this blew up. While I agreed to go to therapy, deep down, I already knew where this was heading. Emily managed to schedule an appointment with a therapist, but we had to wait about a week and a half to get in. During that time, I was obsessing. I was glued to her old iPad, which was still connected to her accounts. I checked every message, every notification, every social media account I could access. I was consumed by it. After a week and a half of monitoring her every move, I didn't find much else to add to what I already knew. I started to think maybe she was genuinely remorseful. Finally, the day of our therapy session arrived. The therapist asked us both to explain why we were there. I told Emily to share her side of the story first. She did, leaving out some of the nastier details, but most of it was laid out on the table. The therapist turned to me and asked, "How does this make you feel about your trust in her? How does this make you feel about your marriage?" I was at a loss for words. Finally, I just said what I had been holding back. If I do not say it out loud right now, I might never. There's no coming back from this for me. This marriage is over. The vows were broken. My trust is shattered, and I think the only thing left to do is to get a divorce. Emily broke down into hysterical sobs. I could feel my stomach twist, but I kept going. I do not know what, if anything, can be salvaged from this relationship. But the marriage itself? It is broken, unfixable. Oddly enough, I felt some relief after saying it out loud, in front of her and a neutral party. The rest of the session was spent with the therapist explaining to her why my feelings were valid and my decision rational. He helped calm her down and suggested we continue seeing him, but separately, so we could work on ourselves individually. He said maybe, years down the road, reconciliation might be possible, but I knew that was not going to happen. Now, before I go further, I knew this was going to turn into a legal battle, especially since we live in a no-fault divorce state. As the breadwinner, I knew I had a lot to lose if things got ugly. That is why I have been very cautious about sharing specific details of my legal process online. There is too much at stake. Fast forward about a week and a half. Emily and I had each had one individual therapy session. To her family, she spun a narrative that the marriage was ending because of broken vows, but that we were both working on healing ourselves. She was staying with her family, and I was still fixated on her digital trail, constantly searching for any evidence of more lies or continued infidelity. Many people told me to stop looking, but let's be honest, I would have done it anyway. Then, one night, I realized there was one place I had not thought to check: the App Store. When I looked at her app download history, I saw she had installed a secret messaging app on her phone about 2 weeks earlier. My stomach dropped. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This whole time, she had been hiding conversations from me, even knowing I had access to her iPad. I doubt she realized that app downloads are visible across connected iCloud devices. I had to know what was in that app. My hands were trembling as I downloaded it onto her iPad and tried logging in with a few of her usual passwords. And then, just like that, I found the truth. She had been messaging Tom through that app since right after our first therapy session. Worse, they were still hooking up whenever I was out of the house. Seeing the messages confirmed everything. I broke down. It was 3 a.m, and I was sitting there in shock. I went to the bathroom and started pulling every bottle of prescription medication I could find. I sat on the edge of my bed with a handful of pills, crying uncontrollably. I was ready to end it all. In a desperate moment, I called my mom, no answer. My dad, no answer. Finally, I called my sister, and thank God, she picked up. Through sobs, I told her what I had found. She did not know I had the pills in my hand, but she stayed on the phone with me, talking me down. After about an hour, I felt numb enough to put the pills back and lie down. Sleep never came. The next morning, I could not bear to stay in that house. I packed up the pills and the iPad, took them to work, and handed them over to a trusted coworker. I told him to lock them in his desk and not give them back, no matter what. He agreed, and I felt like I could finally breathe, just a little. Now, I had what I needed, undeniable proof that Emily was not just unfaithful, but also a manipulative liar. This was the confirmation I had been searching for, but it came at a cost I never imagined. I spent days tormenting myself over what to do with the information I had uncovered. Part of me wanted to blow her entire life up, tell everyone who knew her exactly what she had done and what kind of person she truly was. But I held back. I knew I had already started the process of ending the marriage, and there was still a chance she could retaliate in ways that would make things financially and emotionally devastating. As the days passed, she tried harder and harder to contact me, texts, calls, even coming by the house unannounced. Eventually, she stopped by under the guise of checking in. I was already at my breaking point, and seeing her felt like salt in an open wound. I kept my responses short and vague, trying to stay calm. I did not know how to handle the situation yet. Then she snapped. She accused me of acting distant and weird, and it was enough to make me lose my patience. I asked her directly, "Have you had any contact with Tom since that night?" She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "No. I blocked him on everything." "Are you absolutely sure about that?" I pressed. She doubled down, saying, "I swear I haven't." "He's disgusting. I could never do that to you." That was my cue. I leaned forward, keeping my voice even, and said, "Then why did I find this?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence, the screenshots from the app, the messages, the plans they made behind my back. I told her I had even recorded parts of their conversations just to make sure she could not deny it. Her face crumpled as she dropped to the floor, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. I stayed calm. "Here is how this is going to work. I am not going to tell anyone about this, but in exchange, you will not fight me on anything during the divorce. I will be fair, more fair than you deserve, but if you make this difficult, I will make sure everyone knows what you have done. The choice is yours." She left the house in tears, and 2 days later, she was served the divorce papers. Since then, I have kept my word. I have not spoken about this to anyone outside my immediate family, but I have been tracking her movements using the Find My iPhone feature. Every single night, she has been visiting Tom at the house where he lives with his mother. She tells her family she is attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, but the screenshots I have of her location tell a very different story. Why she has not changed her iCloud password yet is beyond me, but I keep documenting everything anyway. I do not know why. Maybe it is my way of staying grounded, or maybe it is just a habit now. Either way, I am counting the days until the legal timeline passes and she no longer has the option to contest anything. The hardest part of all this is the sheer injustice of it. Emily gets to be with her family every day, pretending like she is working on herself, then sneaks off every night to be with him and comes back in the middle of the night to keep up appearances. Meanwhile, I go to work, come home to an empty house, and try to survive the crushing loneliness. Thankfully, I am past the point of ever considering self-harm again, but that does not mean these are easy days. I take things hour by hour, day by day, just trying to get through it all. I do not know what comes next for me, but I am holding on until I reach the point where I can leave all of this behind, mentally, emotionally, and financially. Thank you for reading and for offering your wisdom, support, and kindness. You have been my lifeline in a time where I felt like I had no one to turn to. I may not know you personally, but I trust you more than I could ever trust her again. Thank you. Update 2. This is my third post here, and I hope it will be my last. The support I received from this community helped pull me through the darkest days of my life. I waited until now to update you because, at long last, my divorce is final. After the absurdly long 6-month and 1-day cooling off period, it is finally over. She did not contest anything, and I am free to move forward. I have gone completely no contact with her, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I am starting to feel like myself again. I know a lot of people followed my story after D-Day, and as crazy and horrifying as it was, I should have known the months following would be just as insane. What I did not mention in my last post was that I had already filed the divorce papers with the county. I also followed the advice many of you gave and returned the iPad, cutting off my access to her accounts. It was the only way to stop myself from obsessing over her every move. By then, I had all the evidence I needed and knew exactly what I wanted. The divorce process was slow and painful, but it worked out better than I could have hoped. I knew I could not let this turn into a long, drawn-out legal battle. As the breadwinner in a no-fault state, I was not willing to risk paying spousal support or losing more than I already had. So, I came up with a plan I am not particularly proud of, but one that got the job done. I kept things civil with Emily, even meeting her a few times under the pretense of working on our relationship. I told her we needed to end the marriage officially so we could start fresh, build something stronger. I cannot believe she bought that nonsense, but it worked. She signed the papers without a second thought, and I managed to keep my 401k, avoid spousal support, and protect my finances. Looking back, I do not feel great about the tactics I used, but I cannot deny they worked. I had to protect myself from someone who had already betrayed me in unimaginable ways. Now that it is over, I feel like I can finally start rebuilding my life. I made it my mission to keep things as smooth and painless as possible for Emily, not because I cared about her feelings, but because I wanted to expedite the process and keep everything private. I was determined to push through this phase without creating unnecessary drama. A prime example of this was how I had her served with the divorce papers. I arranged for a mutual friend to come to my house, the one we had shared, and act as a neutral third party during the handoff. Emily showed up, signed the papers without reading them thoroughly, and sealed them in the provided envelope. I doubt she ever actually looked at the details of those forms. I had painted an incredibly favorable picture for her, one that conveniently omitted any mention of spousal support beyond splitting what was left in our joint account. That was the biggest hurdle I wanted to avoid, paying her a dime in support. Over the first few months, I leaned heavily on the "I need time to think" excuse to avoid her as much as possible. However, I did meet up with her about twice a month. We had dinner or chatted in public places, keeping things civil while I maintained the appearance of being open to reconciliation. These meetings were always in public to prevent any possibility of her claiming I did something inappropriate. I kept the act going. I played into her hopes of working things out and made her believe I was processing my emotions and trying to find forgiveness. The truth was, I had no intention of reconciling. By keeping her in this state of false hope, I managed to remove her from my bank accounts, with her help, get her name off the lease, and even move all of her belongings into a storage unit. I convinced her that getting her stuff out of the house would make it feel less haunting and help me heal. This charade made the separation process significantly easier than I ever expected. Emily believed she was doing the right thing for us, which allowed me to get through the first 4 of the 6 mandatory months relatively smoothly. But in month 4, the illusion began to crumble. One evening, I got a text from a family member of hers. They knew the truth about her affair with Tom and asked if Emily and I were still working things out. Keeping up my act, I replied, "Yes, why?" What they sent back blindsided me: a picture of Emily and Tom having dinner at a restaurant a few cities away. The family member added, "This is happening right now." It turned out they had run into the two of them while meeting coworkers for drinks. I lost it. I texted Emily immediately, asking if we could talk. She responded with a lie, claiming she was in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and would call me afterward. That was the final straw. My reply was sharp: "I didn't know they held AA meetings at restaurant name, and I didn't realize Tom was now your sponsor." That got her attention. She called me right away, furious, accusing me of stalking her. I fired back with words I will not repeat here, but told her, in no uncertain terms, that I never wanted to speak to her again. That marked the beginning of the final 2 months of our divorce. Emily and Tom's relationship, once private, became increasingly public. I blocked both of them on all social media platforms, but updates continued to trickle in through mutual friends. As her relationship with Tom became bolder, more people began reaching out to me, curious about what was going on. When they asked, I told them the truth. It was not difficult to get people on my side. The betrayal was evident, and most of our mutual friends, along with many of her relatives, expressed shock at her actions. Talking to those who knew both of us became a form of therapy. Having people validate my pain and acknowledge the horror of what she had done made me feel seen. Many had already confronted Emily and learned that she was drastically downplaying the situation. She admitted to cheating but left out key details. I gladly filled in the gaps. Valentine's Day rolled around just a few days before our divorce was finalized. Along with the holiday came 3 separate screenshots sent to me by friends. The posts were all from Emily's social media. She and Tom were embracing in the pictures, with a caption about how God brought such a wonderful man into her life. She wrote about how she couldn't be happier and hoped Tom would be the man she marries someday. Whenever a door shuts, God opens a window, the caption concluded. I could not help but laugh at the confused comments from distant friends and extended family members who had no idea who Tom was. Many posted shocked emojis, and a few bluntly asked, "Who is this?" I wish I could say the post did not bother me, but it did. Deep down, I still felt the sting of loss. But more than anything, I felt disgust for her audacity and her ability to manipulate others into thinking she was the victim. I also felt sick knowing how long I had ignored the warning signs. How did I not see this version of Emily all those years? As for Tom, I had no energy or respect left to waste on him. He chose to be with her, and I firmly believe karma will take care of them both. Finally, last week, the day of reckoning arrived. The court finalized our divorce, and the mandatory waiting period passed without Emily contesting anything. I walked away with everything intact: my 401k, no spousal support, no extra debt, no court battles, no lawyers. Best of all, I would never have to deal with her again. That evening, I blocked her number. The next day, 7 of my closest friends threw me a divorce party. 6 of them had been mutual friends of ours, but they all chose to support me. The party was a night of celebration and laughter, captured in Snapchat posts that I later learned Emily saw. Her reaction? Blocking all of them and sending angry texts to a few. Her maid of honor even attended the party and has since cut all ties with Emily. P.S. There is one final internal struggle eating away at me. Maybe someone out there can offer some clarity. Back when I was obsessively digging through Emily's digital trails, I stumbled across something that still haunts me. I discovered she had been sleeping with another man from her hometown during the entire mess with Tom. Here is the kicker: this guy is an old flame of hers, but he has a wife and a child. I feel this gnawing guilt for not speaking up. Should I tell his wife? I wrestle with the idea of breaking her family apart and the weight of that decision staying on my conscience. What should I do? Reveal what I know? Stay anonymous if I tell her? Or should I just keep this burden to myself? It keeps me up at night, making me sick with anxiety and guilt. If anyone has advice, I am all ears. Update 3. Hello again, everyone. In just 17 days, I will hit the 2nd anniversary of what I call D-Day. When I look back at the first posts I wrote about my situation, I can honestly say I never believed I would make it this far. The passage of time has brought some healing, but it has not erased the pain, the hurt, or the lasting scars from what Emily did to me. Many of you kind folks have reached out, asking for an update. So here I am, ready to share the latest developments, though I warn you, it is as unbelievable as the rest of my story. If you are just joining, let me suggest you catch up on my earlier posts first. You might find yourself stunned, shocked, or just flat out appalled. Since the divorce was finalized in February 2019, I have done my best to maintain no contact with Emily. But in today's hyper-connected world, that is easier said than done. Every once in a while, I would see a post from one of her distant relatives or hear something from a mutual acquaintance. It was like a slow drip of information that I could not entirely escape. The first major shock came in May of 2019. One of my best friends called me and said, "You are not going to believe this. Emily is getting remarried." I was floored. Apparently, she had moved on to some guy from Tennessee. My friend's husband, who had not yet blocked Emily on Facebook, managed to grab screenshots of her posts leading up to the big announcement. The timeline was almost absurd. Between March and July of that year, Emily and her new man had gone from strangers to husband and wife. I found out that her fling with Tom had fizzled out not long after our divorce was finalized. From there, Emily started posting cryptic updates on social media, talking about everything happening for a reason and how new doors open when others close. Then, in July, she dropped the bomb: a picture of herself standing in a courthouse with a man none of us recognized. In the photo, she was holding hands with this stranger, their wedding bands visible. They were showing off what I assumed was a marriage certificate. The caption? "Excited to start the rest of my life with such an amazing man. Feeling so blessed. Look out, Tennessee, here we come." The post was geotagged in California. I could not wrap my head around it. Who gets married after meeting online just a few months earlier? But that is exactly what happened. I reached out to a cousin-in-law of Emily's, someone I had always gotten along with, to get more details. What I learned was even more mind-boggling. Her new husband was someone she met online. They had been talking for a few months, mostly through texts and phone calls. He proposed to her over the phone, and she said yes. Within a week, he flew to California to meet her in person for the first time. They got married at a courthouse in a random town 2 hours away from her family's home. Not a single member of her family attended the ceremony. According to the cousin, Emily's family had little notice and even less interest in supporting the marriage. By Sunday, they were packing up a moving truck with all of her belongings. On Monday, she and her new husband were on their way to Tennessee. The whole thing felt surreal. I knew enough people that verified the story to believe it, but it still felt like something out of a bad reality TV show. I pitied the poor guy. He clearly had no idea what he was signing up for. Marrying someone in California, a no-fault divorce state, could leave him in a vulnerable position if things went south, just like it had for me. But maybe ignorance is bliss, or maybe he thought he had found his soulmate. Either way, it was no longer my concern. For a while, I managed to push the whole fiasco out of my mind. Summer came and went. Then, in the fall of 2019, I was blindsided again. While scrolling through Instagram, a video popped up on my feed. It was Emily, holding a plate with a cookie frosted in blue. Her dad was standing in front of her, covering his eyes as she counted down. 3, 2, 1. "It is a boy," she exclaimed. Her father uncovered his eyes, and the room erupted in excitement. I sat there, stunned. It was a gender reveal video. Her mother, who had just made her Instagram account public, had posted it. Somehow, Instagram's algorithm decided it was something I needed to see. That was a tough night. Seeing that video dredged up a lot of emotions: anger, sadness, jealousy. Being a father is something I have always wanted, and for a brief moment, I imagined an alternate reality where the gender reveal was for our child. But then I reminded myself of the nightmare I had just escaped. In time, I have learned to accept that she is no longer my problem. While she lives her new life, I continue to rebuild mine, one day at a time. I have no idea what her future holds, and truthfully, I do not care to find out. I could have been the one becoming a father. At 32 years old, I thought I'd be living that dream by now. Instead, I'm not even on the path toward a meaningful relationship, let alone starting a family. I keep reminding myself that I still have time to build the life I want with someone I truly love. But no matter how rational I try to be, it's hard not to compare my reality to where I thought I'd be at this point in my life. In this particular situation, though, I know I'd rather be where I am now than in the shoes of Emily's new husband. By now, their child is probably born. Thankfully, I've been spared the details, and my friends have been kind enough to keep me in the dark about her life. As much as I still wonder from time to time, I know it's better this way, not knowing. The silver lining is that, as time passes, Emily and her chaotic life occupy less and less space in my mind. There are bad days, sure, and the loneliness during the stay-at-home orders has amplified those moments. But overall, the progress I've made is undeniable. I work as an independent contractor now, and I'm able to do my job from home, which has been a blessing and a challenge. The isolation can be difficult, but I try to balance it out by going for walks and staying connected with my family. I've visited my parents more often than I ever thought I would, just to feel less alone. When I feel overwhelmed or hopeless, I think back to the days following D-Day. Back then, I was sure I wouldn't make it through, yet here I am. I remind myself that I got through that hell, and I'll get through this too. One moment at a time, one step forward each day. Even when it feels like time is crawling, it's still moving. To everyone who's read my updates, thank you for your time, support, and encouragement. You gave me a place to vent, to be heard, and to find some sense of stability during the most turbulent time of my life. Your words gave me hope when I felt like I had none. I can say with absolute certainty that this community saved me in ways I'll never fully be able to express. Here's to another 2 years of surviving, thriving, and building a brighter future. Update 4. It's been 3 years since D-Day and more than a year since my last post. This past year has been the first where I've been able to focus entirely on myself. I don't have much to share about Emily or her life because I've gone completely no contact. I've blocked her family, mutual friends, and anyone who might inadvertently bring her back into my orbit. Cutting ties with her family was one of the hardest decisions I've made. They were my family for so many years, and some of them felt as close as blood relatives. Losing those relationships felt unfair, but I knew it was necessary for my healing. Keeping anything related to her off my radar has been the best decision I could have made. That strategy has paid off. As time goes on, I think about her less and less. When I do, it's more along the lines of, thank God I dodged that disaster, rather than any lingering pain. This past year, I took a leap of faith and started my own consulting business in tech support and IT system design. It was a massive career shift, but the risk paid off. I landed a few contracts early on, including 2 with local government organizations, and they've since been renewed for another year. The freedom of working for myself and being solely responsible for my success has been invigorating. I've gained a sense of pride in my work and, in turn, myself. My finances are stronger than ever. I've shed the memories that used to haunt me, and I've rebuilt myself physically, emotionally, and mentally. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm thriving as a man. That said, there's one area of my life that still feels unresolved: trust. My ability to trust others, especially women, has been shattered. It made starting my business easier because I knew I could rely only on myself. But when it comes to relationships, my walls are still high. I tried dipping my toes into online dating about a year ago, but it was a disaster. The women I met seemed more interested in attention than connection. 3 or 4 dates were enough to convince me that, for now, I'm better off alone. I refuse to let anyone into my life just for the sake of not being lonely. Don't get me wrong, I still yearn for intimacy and connection. I hope to share my life with someone someday. But I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on having a partner. I'd rather be patient and wait for something real than settle for less. There's a nagging voice in my head that likes to remind me I'm 34 years old and should have a wife and kids by now. I see my friends living the lives I once imagined for myself, taking family trips, doting over their children, and building their dream homes. Meanwhile, I sit here with money in the bank and wonder, does this make me feel better about my life? That inner dialogue is something I'm still working on. I know that life doesn't follow a script, and comparing myself to others won't help. For now, I'm focusing on gratitude. I'm thankful for the life I have and for the fact that I'm no longer tethered to someone who betrayed me so deeply. Looking forward, I'm hopeful. If I keep putting myself first and making the most of my days, I believe I'll look back and feel proud of how far I've come. Thank you all for being part of this journey. Your advice, kindness, and encouragement have been invaluable. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. Here's to building a better life, one day at a time.